Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rachel,
And I'm Andrew.
and we are Picture the Scene podcast, a true crime podcast aiming to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. We bring you a new episode on a weekly basis, with Andrew mainly focusing on the lesser known crimes from the UK and Ireland, and me taking on some of the bigger, well known cases from time to time. If you happen to like what you hear, then please do spread the word to your friends and family about us. Also, please follow us on whatever social media platform you prefer. And wherever you listen, if you have the capability, then why not give us a rating and review as well? These ratings and reviews mean so much to us, not only because we love hearing from our wonderful listeners, but it encourages other listeners to go find us and give us a try. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And if you like us that much that you want to support us, you can now do so for less than the cost of a small Americano on Patreon. With our sign up starting from as little as £1, we release bonus content every month, and we also take recommendations from our Patreon subscribers. Your support for our little pod really does mean the world to us, so thank you to each and every one of you. And finally, for now, the links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes or by visiting patreon.com/scenepod. That's patreon.com/SCENEPOD. And before we get into it today, as we are a true crime podcast, we must warn you that listener caution is always advised. Today is no different because we are dealing with the emotional topic of baby and infant death. So, Andrew, before we get into it, how have you been since we last recorded?
I've been good, thank you, Rachel. I've been sparkling. I'm not really looking forward to this, but yeah, it should be interesting. I don't really know the case, so I'm intrigued to learn more about it. But I've been good, thank you, sparkling. Looking forward to this. What about yourself?
Yeah, all good here. Okay, so what's left for me to do now is just to ask, are you ready for some true crime, Andrew?
I am, Rach. Let's do this.
Today, I'm taking you to Hereford, a rural town in Herefordshire in England, with a population of 53,112 at the last census in 2021. It's the 4th of January 1990, and the weather is noticeably warmer for a winter's day, reaching temperatures of 12 degrees Celsius by mid-morning, which is around 54 degrees Fahrenheit, when a baby girl named Lucy was born to parents John, aged 44, and Susan, aged 29. Whilst, of course, it was happy news for the first-time parents, baby Lucy's birth on the 4th of January was quite a traumatic one, which would later lead her to study and qualify in nursing by the summer of 2011, in an effort to help others the way the nurses and doctors had once helped her on that mild January morning. Fast forward 28 years after her birth, and it's 6 a.m. on a warm and clear blue morning, the 3rd of July in 2018 to be exact, when the same girl, now aged 28 years and 181 days, was led away from her semi-detached home in Chester into an unmarked police car in handcuffs. It would go on to be the first of 3 arrests for nurse Lucy Letby, the second being in June 2019, and for the third and final time, November 2020, when she was eventually charged with 22 counts of murder and attempted murder of small, helpless, premature, and newborn babies. In total, Letby was accused of murdering 7 infants and the attempted murder of a further 10 infants over the course of 13 months. We now know Lucy Letby to be one of the most prolific child murderers in modern British history, found guilty of murdering 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 more on Friday, the 18th of August, 2023. The jury returned not guilty verdicts on 2 counts of attempted murder, and they were unable to reach verdicts on 6 further attempted murder charges, details of which we'll also be covering for those following the case closely throughout the 10 months at trial, and then the 110 hours of jury deliberations. These dates, the victims, and the details will likely be forever etched in your memory. For today's episode, we wanted to provide a brief overview of each of the victims and the crimes nurse Lucy Letby was accused of, perhaps for anyone who didn't follow the case in its entirety. Now, given the limited amount of time we have to share the information, if you want to dive further into the case, I'd highly recommend you go and listen to the trial of Lucy Letby from the Mail Plus. There are, as at recording this episode today, 63 episodes available to listen to, which cover the entire trial and jury deliberations, and also some expert witness testaments and various other interviews. Each episode lasts for approximately 25 minutes, and they're packed full of information. So that's the trial of Lucy Letby, and it's available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Okay, so back to our episode today. Prior to her arrest in July 2016, Nurse Lucy Letby was known as a friendly, caring, and eager to please nurse with an active social life, attending the gym and salsa dance classes regularly, enjoying going out with friends, and taking holidays with both her parents and close friends each year. Sounds just like your typical 20-something-year-old, don't you think, Andrew?
Yeah, like everyone up and down the country.
And following her arrest, during the initial police search of her home, they took photos of a notice board in her kitchen, which was covered in pictures and letters, including one drawn by her godson, reading "Number One Godmother awarded to Lucy Letby." On her unmade bed, they discovered cuddly toys, including Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore. Picture art was hung on the wall saying, "Leave sparkles wherever you go." And there was a duvet cover with sweet dreams and fairy lights that adorned her bed. A drawer in the living room was found to contain various documents and medical notes for her two cats, Tigger and Smudge, along with a Mother's Day card which they had sent her just months earlier.
The cats, they sent her a Mother's Day card.
Yes, they did, indeed.
I'm really struggling here already, Rachel, because I know who she is, and the person you're describing sounds like quite a nice person. But yeah, so let's carry on with this.
Letby would actually weep in court as she saw reminders of her childlike home life, and on the surface, she was just an ordinary woman, it seemed. A little beige, as the Detective Chief Inspector Nicola Evans would go on to describe her during a later interview with the press. So how could this plain, average, normal girl be capable of multiple murders and attempted murders? Well, this is the question that may never be answered. But she was indeed found guilty of the murder of 7 babies and attempted murder of further 6 by a jury of 11 on Friday, the 18th of August. As I have already suggested, we're going to briefly cover each of her known victims who were referenced in the trial. It's worth noting that due to the very sensitive nature and high complexity of this case, none of the babies or the families involved have been named, so we'll be referring to them as baby A through to baby Q, 17 babies in total. This trial also covers just a small part, only 13 months, of Letby's career as a nurse. And Operation Hummingbird, the official investigation into the crimes committed by Lucy Letby, is unlikely to close until review of all of her patients in care over the 5 years she practiced. That's expected to be around 4,000 infants and children are complete.
Wow.
I should probably note as well, she did a stint in Liverpool Women's and Children's Hospital, so there could be some adult patients in the mix as well.
Do these sort of criminals, would they do children and adults, or just like one type?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like, would
Target.
she only want to harm children, or would it not matter as long as it's somebody in her care?
Like it was just during the trial, it just kept on coming out that she just only wanted to work with the sickest babies. She did like course after course after course to educate herself on working with tiny premature babies, specifically so that she could like climb up the ranks in the neonatal unit. Yeah, I think I could take a guess at it. It was to target babies and children, because they're unable to speak and defend themselves and challenge what's going on, aren't they?
Yeah.
So today, I'll be taking you through the events that unfolded in the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital over a 13-month period from June 2015 to June 2016, where Lucy Letby worked as a neonatal nurse. Despite attempts by some of her colleagues to raise the alarm throughout this period, Nurse Letby was left to attack and harm patients until what is now known from the court case as a tipping point at the end of June 2016, when she was eventually removed from the unit. Just 382 days separate the death of the first baby and the attempted murder of the last. Baby A baby boy, was born 6 weeks early along with his twin sister, baby B, and was only days old and healthy when Letby took over his care on a night shift on the 8th of June, 2015. 30 minutes later, he would deteriorate rapidly, as the medical notes shared during trial confirmed, and he died within just 90 minutes of Letby coming on duty. Letby would later be found guilty of baby A's murder via IV air embolism. Now, an air embolism is a bubble of air inserted via an IV intravenous strip that then becomes trapped in a blood vessel and blocks it. Air embolisms are known to cause serious and potentially fatal conditions, such as a stroke or a heart attack. On the 11th of June, baby B would also be injected with air by Letby. about 28 hours after her twin brother had died. Baby B actually survived the attack after being resuscitated by doctors. However, tests would later confirm that she too had a gas-filled bowel, something which would be replicated in several babies over the course of the following year. Letby was found guilty of the attempted murder of baby B, also by IV air embolism. Baby C, a baby boy, was born 7 weeks early and weighed just £1 12 ounces. That's about 800 grams, Andrew. But despite his tiny body, he was in good health. Letby was seen standing over his monitor as his alarm sounded on the evening of the 14th of June 2015. She was not his designated nurse. Baby C died as a result of air being injected into his stomach. Letby was found guilty of baby C's murder by air inserted into the stomach and not the bloodstream, as with baby A and baby B. Baby D, a baby girl, was the only baby in this case which was not born prematurely, who weighed a healthy £6 and 14 ounces. So that's about 2.7 kilograms, which really puts into context like baby C's weight at 800 grams, less than a bag of sugar. Just days after baby D's birth, Letby, who was not baby D's designated nurse, injected air into baby D's bloodstream, which caused her to collapse 3 times in the early hours of the 22nd of June 2015. Her third collapse would prove fatal. Those attending her resuscitation noted the discoloration on baby D's skin, again something which would be replicated in several babies over the course of the following year. Letby was found guilty of baby D's murder by IV air embolism. By the 2nd of July, 3 babies had died and 1 had crashed unexpectedly, which was highly unusual for the hospital. So Dr. Stephen Brewery, the head consultant on the neonatal unit, carried out a review of the 3 deaths. Alison Kelly, the director of nursing and deputy chief executive at the time, was informed that Letby was the only nurse on shift for each of the deaths. However, no further action was taken and Letby remained on the unit. Baby E, a baby boy, was born 7 weeks early, along with his twin brother, baby F, and weighed less than 3 pounds, which he weighed about 1.4 kilos. Baby E's mother interrupted Letby, attempting to murder the newborn after she arrived on the unit with his milk during the evening of the 4th of August 2015. But baby E went on to die following a fatal bleed, which was believed to have been the result of Letby interfering with his nasogastric tube. Letby was found guilty of murdering baby E by IV air embolism and bleeding from the trauma. Baby F, a baby boy and twin brother of baby E, is believed to have been poisoned by insulin less than 24 hours after his twin brother was murdered on the 5th of August. A blood sample taken following his collapse confirmed extremely high levels of insulin and very low C-peptide levels, proof he had been injected with insulin. But this information was not shared with his parents at the time of his collapse. Letby was found guilty of the attempted murder of baby F by insulin poisoning.
So we're on baby F now, Rachel.
Yeah.
So that's 6.
Mm.
Like, it shouldn't have got past. You could understand maybe getting past baby A because it's a one-off, but 6? Like, I don't understand, especially when they already have suspicions. But one doctor did at least, and a mother caught one. Like, how do you get past 6? You mentioned up to baby Q, which I'm not looking forward to hearing all those letters in the alphabet, but that's 6 already. In what space of time?
So this is up to 5th of August, so it started in June. So 2 and a bit months.
2 and a bit months, 6 babies in 2 and a bit months. Right.
And just wanted to kind of correct you on one point. When you say, especially when there were suspicions, Dr. Brewery did not point the finger. He just noted that one nurse was on duty, and it was more an observation towards, let's keep an eye on things. It was absolutely at no point at that stage did anyone suspect Letby of foul play. And in fact, when it came to it, the consultant doctors at the Countess were all horrified, down the line. I think maybe after maybe 10 or maybe 11 or 12 crashes and or deaths that they were even muttering the words, could it be one of us that's causing this? So that at that very early stage, it was just an observation that was made. And these observations are quite often made because, maybe that nurse knows a pattern that's forming, or is conscious and aware of something not quite right on the ward. So that's good observation to kind of go to them and say, hey, are we, understaffed, or was there a particular issue over the last 2.5 months that you can help us resolve? If that makes sense.
It makes sense. Maybe there should be more than observations, but it makes sense.
I think it's so rare though for a medical professional to be harming patients. Like, so rare, isn't it?
But if
The
it's
only
so,
the only other case that I've heard of is Beverly Allitt, and that was in 1991 when she was arrested for the murder of the 3 babies and children in her care.
I understand. Wouldn't the argument be though that if it's so rare, these things should be spotted a lot earlier because it's unusual rather than a commonplace?
Well, I don't know. My head might be too far into this case, but I just think the wool was pulled over everyone's eyes because no one could believe that it could be one of their own.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I actually read an interview that a newspaper did with one of the nurses who can't be named again. But right up until the end of the trial, she was convinced of Letby's innocence. And she sat through the whole trial and she was like, there's no way I can defend her anymore. She worked with her day in, day out on some of these shifts and saw the way she was, but all of the behavior that was brought to trial, all of the text messages and the notes and the everything that she did, that nurse had no idea of. So
Fair enough.
there's 2 things that I want to highlight with baby F. Now, first of all, like as I did with the IV air embolism, I just wanted to highlight insulin poisoning and how that can be found and evidenced. So when someone is given too much insulin, hypoglycemia or low blood sugar can occur as a result. Now, when the blood sugar levels are too low, the body cannot function properly. It's easy to tell if someone has been given insulin, medically, as opposed to their body making it, by the levels of C-peptide. I don't know whether you remember me referencing there was low C-peptide levels in baby F. When insulin is made naturally, the same amount of C-peptide is made, but when insulin is administered into the body, similar levels of C-peptide are not present. So that was the first thing I wanted to note. The other thing I wanted to highlight in baby F's case is that the parents were not told about the insulin being administered to their baby until charges were confirmed. And obviously, family liaison officers would attend each family's home and kind of break the news to them that, a nurse had been charged with a crime relating to the care or the death of their child. So, it kind of highlights that at the time that the babies were being treated in the hospital, they weren't medically, the hospital weren't giving full disclosure to the parents, which I guess in the moment when the baby's crashing, you can kind of understand that doctors and nurses aren't going to take the parent to one side and say, hey, right now, this is happening to your child. But you'd imagine in the aftermath, when the doctor's doing the rounds and kind of seeing the improvement in your baby, that they go, right, do you know why this happened a couple of days ago? Well, we're going to sit down, we're going to tell you what we found and why that might have happened. And, in some cases, and certainly with the insulin poisoning, it took the family being notified that Letby had been charged with the attempted murder to know what exactly had happened to their baby, which is mad.
Yeah, it does sound unusual.
So baby G, a baby girl, and the most premature of all the babies in this investigation, was born 15 weeks early, and she weighed just over 1 pound, which is about 450 grams.
That's tiny. She would fit in your hand, wouldn't she?
Absolutely. Now, on the 7th of September, 100 days after she was born, the hospital was making a big deal of this because it was absolutely amazing that she had survived such a premature birth. Letby did attempt to kill her and would continue to attempt a further 2 times over a 3-week period. Now, baby G, who is now 8 years of age at the time of this recording, is severely disabled as a result of Letby's attack. And Letby was found guilty on 1 count of attempted murder of baby G by delivering excess milk and air via her nasogastric tube. Baby I, a baby girl, was born at 27 weeks, so that's 13 weeks early, and a tiny 2 pounds, 2 ounces, just 99 grams. This murder, it was described in court as a persistent, calculated, and cold-blooded one. On the 23rd of October 2015, just 9 weeks after she was born, Letby killed baby I on her 4th attempt after inserting air into the newborn's stomach. Her previous 3 attempts were noted twice for overfeeding baby I her milk and once for inserting air into her bloodstream. Letby actually went on to send a sympathy card to baby I's parents on the day of her funeral. Now, this is the only known card to have been sent by the nurse following the death of baby on the ward. And after baby I's death, Letby was found crying on the unit, saying, "It's always me when it happens, my babies." Letby was found guilty of murdering baby I by inserting air into her stomach.
And do you think then, so this is different. So this, and obviously I wasn't there, and she may have been faking the emotions that she was feeling, but to send a sympathy card and to be found crying, why do you think this one was different than the other ones?
So I've tried not to add my own kind of speculation into the case today, but if you ask, I'm happy to share my thoughts.
Yes, I would like to know your
With
thoughts.
some of the parents, she bonded quite closely, and obviously, like 9 weeks of baby I's life were spent on the ward, and Letby had like tried, well, 4 times to take her life. So she'd spent a lot of time after all those crashes, probably with the parents, at the crib side, helping them and, talking to them a lot and nurturing them through, how the baby was doing and things like that. So I think there's that sense of, I've built this bond with these parents. With baby I's parents as well, after the death of the child, she was searching a silly amount of times on Facebook for their names. Something that she did with most of her patients was look them up on Facebook. And the reason why she was able to remember the patients' names wasn't because she had this phenomenal memory, but a lot of the time she'd kept the notes, the medical notes of the crashes and the deaths, and she'd stored all these notes in her pockets of her nurse's uniform and brought them home with her. So she had like paperwork essentially to look back on and kind of be able to like catch up, if you like, on the progress that the families were making once they'd left the ward.
That's interesting. And for our listeners who know this case, apologies if you think, why is he asking such simple questions? But I really stay away from cases like this normally. But a couple of questions then. So the case notes, they were almost like trophies she was keeping for herself, would you say?
They were very careful not to like sensationalize it like that in court, but absolutely that's exactly what I thought. I thought, some people take items of clothing from their victims, don't they? And others locks of hair and things like that. But I felt like these medical notes were absolutely, her kind of moment to reflect when she was in her own home privately. And she would go on to say on the stand, when asked why she had all these notes at home, why why was that? And she would say, "Oh, it's an error, it's just really hard not to take nurses' notes home, like they just popped in my pocket and I didn't think twice." And had I have had access to a shredder, I absolutely would have shredded them. Well, on the police investigation and search for a house in July 2018, they found a shredder in her
Right.
second bedroom, so she absolutely could have shredded the document. Now,
And
what I will say is my friend's auntie is a nurse. And when I was doing some investigation into this case, I asked her just a few questions. She worked for temporary period at the Countess of Chester, not when Lucy Letby was there. But I asked her whether that could happen. Do you just put mindlessly a piece of paper in your pocket and then walk home with it? And she was like, absolutely. But you would just bring it in the next day and throw it away, or you would medically shred it. You would get rid of it because you would know that is not something, that you want to leave with. So from that perspective, it's a bit like suspect.
okay, and my second question is, you said that she bonded with some of the parents more than the others, in reference to baby I.
Mm.
Again, I'm sure you're going to talk about this later, but this indicates to me that she couldn't stop herself then.
Actually, I don't talk about it. Like I said, I've been quite I've been quite factual on the case today because it is such an emotive topic and there are going to be people with opinions. But seeing as though you ask, I'll share my own thoughts on it. So I believe that, yeah, she was in some instances wanting to be like a knight in shining armor with these parents and, helping save their dying baby or children. And in some cases, it was mentioned in court that she was doing it for the attention of doctors. One specific one, who was not named, as with most people giving evidence and the victims in this case, it was suggested that she had fallen in love with him and that he was on call and present for some of the crashes where, she would get that interaction with him and be able to, after the death or the sudden crash of the child, be able to spend time with him after, like processing what had happened and, having that time spent. So there was an element for her of a thrill, from that perspective, I believe, anyway.
Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Okay, so by the 23rd of October 2015, the same consultant who led the review in July, Dr. Brewery, became increasingly concerned following the death of baby I. So another staffing review found Letby was once again present at all of these unusual deaths and crashes on the ward. So when a baby dies or crashes, the doctors and nurses all get together and they kind of have a debrief. You'll have probably seen if you've watched like medical programs and dramas. They all get together and discuss what went wrong, what could have been better, and what will come of it in future, additional care, additional needs for the hospital or for the nursing staff, etc. At this time, another consultant, Dr. Ravi Jairam, alerted management to both his and Dr. Stephen Breary's concerns. So at this point, there is suspicion. And these doctors were very much concerned that Letby was present. And, so that kind of notice that had been looked at after 4 crashes and 3 deaths had now grown to suspicion. He was told, so Dr. J. Ram was firmly told not to make a fuss, and Letby once again remained on the neonatal unit. By the 23rd of October 2015, the same consultant who led the review in July, a Dr. Brewery, became increasingly concerned following the death of baby I. Another staffing review found Letby was once again present at all of these unusual deaths and crashes on the ward. So now that observation that was made after the 3 deaths and 1 crash has turned into suspicion. So it's taken some time. Yeah. So it's 2.5 months in July when he'd kind of made those observations, right? And now it's October. And there's very much that suspicion that's set now. At this time, another consultant, Dr. Ravi Jairam, alerted management to both his and Stephen Breary's concerns. So not only is it Stephen Breary that's flagged this up now, but there's another consultant. And I think at the time, like Dr. Ravi Jairam has given multiple interviews, as has Dr. Stephen Breary. And they both second guessed themselves before they like blew the whistle kind of thing and were like, are we absolutely sure about this? Because there's no going back. Like that was their opinion of like how catastrophic this could be. However, at the point that they went to senior management, they were told not to make a fuss, and Letby once again remained on the neonatal unit.
Wow.
So all of the anxiety that you might imagine was going through, their heads at that time and thinking, gosh, we don't want to be right, but we have to say something. And to then just be told, like, what you're talking about, stop making a scene. Like, it's
And
madness.
a few things here. Firstly, when someone gets to be a consultant, that means that you're seen as an expert, aren't you? You've gone past the general practitioner stage where you're actually an expert in your field. So for 2 separate consultants to say this looks suspicious, to then be told, I'm guessing maybe by admin staff, I don't know, but then to be told basically don't make a fuss.
Yeah.
To me, there's two things. A, wouldn't it not be better in this instance and every other instance to investigate everything? And if you're wrong, then if someone is truly innocent, especially in the medical field, they would surely not mind being investigated and be found to be innocent. So any instances where someone is doing things that they shouldn't do will get picked up. So surely it's better to investigate than not to investigate. And secondly, if this, you don't know how many times someone has been told, no, we're not going to investigate this or stop making a fuss. Because there may be other times where people have been not been doing anything and they've been told that, but you don't know until you investigate. So if that's the case, at what stage would someone think it's not worth me raising this because I'm just going to get told don't make a fuss?
No, absolutely. And luckily they kept on, picking away at it. But you're absolutely right. That there are essentially like clerical staff in the senior management positions who have, held positions potentially in the financial sector or, the private sector where they've, been making business-led decisions to make sure that that business, stays afloat and runs effectively and all of that stuff. And you've got like medical professionals that are obviously making sure that patients stay alive. So two very different heads on shoulders there, right? And you've got the medical professionals coming to the clerical staff, clerical management. That is the right word, clerical, isn't it? Yeah. Saying, I've got concerns. I've got concerns. And those staff in those positions are like, yeah, no, like you need to be quiet. It's mad.
Craziness.
Baby L, a baby boy and twin brother of baby M, was born 7 weeks early, weighing a healthy 3 pounds at 1.3 kilograms. And I say healthy, like it was a healthy 3 pounds for being 7 weeks early, right? On the 9th of April 2016, when baby L was just hours old, Letby injected insulin into the dextrose bag attached to baby L. Tests would later find his insulin level was at the top of the scale that the equipment was capable of measuring. And once again, as with the attempted murder of baby F, baby L had very low C-peptide levels. Letby was found guilty of the attempted murder of baby L by insulin poisoning. Baby M, a baby boy and the twin brother of baby L, was born on the 9th of April, again, 7 weeks early, weighing what doctors would also call a healthy 3 pounds. So both twins weighed the same 1.3 kilos or 3 pounds. He suffered an unexpected life-threatening collapse shortly after the insulin poisoning of his brother. His heart rate and breathing dropped dramatically, and he came close to death as a result of being injected with air. He did survive, but suffered brain damage as a result of this attack. Letby was again found guilty of the attempted murder of baby M by IV air embolism.
Rachel, it's even when it's singular, I can't imagine the pain you feel losing or almost losing a child. But so many of these seem to be twins. So it's double the amount. Like you even when it's even when they don't die, if they're seriously injured, if they're not seriously injured, that pain and stress and fear and anguish, like, it's just multiplied, doubled. I can't imagine what those parents must have been feeling like.
Don't forget, so we're on a neonatal ward here. Now, it is for babies who are born prematurely. And I appreciate you don't have twins in your family, nor probably do you know much about twins and their kind of pattern preterm, but they are highly likely to be born before their due date because there's two of them, and there are therefore potential complications with multiple
But
births,
no,
right?
I get that. I do have twins in my family actually, and they were
Oh,
born.
sorry.
No, it's okay. They were born prematurely, but I'm just saying it's just because it's more than likely doesn't mean that the anguish isn't still there
No,
for the parents. And if it's done, if it's natural, like it's because of the early birth or complications, then it can't be helped. But these parents, it's not natural, is it? It's I'm sure beforehand, well, I do have twins in the family. I haven't given birth to twins, but my wife hasn't. But they're told beforehand, this is likely to happen and brace yourselves, but don't worry, we're used to dealing with this, so you're in the best hands, blah, 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 blah. So that's fine. But then when it's even worse, when they're almost dying, extra anguish because they're like, well, they told us that they could deal with this, which is what I meant.
No, sorry, Andrew. No, absolutely. And in fact, even though these babies are brought onto the neonatal unit after birth, the doctors at the time of caring for these children aren't concerned. Like after birth, I'm saying they're healthy weights. They're doing well. They require care. The parents can't just take them home the way that like a newborn normally would come home on day 1 or 2 after birth. But the doctors and nurses that are caring for these children are confident that they will leave that ward at some point in the near future and live a normal life. That they're just coming onto these wards to be monitored essentially and looked after until they reach full term or until they're suitable to go home. And in all of these cases, they're marked as unusual deaths or crashes because the doctors at birth could not see anything clinically wrong with the children. And then look at what's happened.
Yeah.
On the 11th of May 2016, Dr. Stephen Brewery, who you will recall had previously raised the alarm on 2 occasions relating to the increase in collapses and deaths on the neonatal unit at the Countess Chester Hospital, met with fellow consultants to raise further concerns about Letby. At this point, Dr. Brewery felt his concerns had been completely dismissed by the Trust, who were suggesting other NHS services at the hospital might be to blame for the spike in deaths. Now, I know we spoke about it briefly before, but I can't imagine the bravery it would have taken him to come forward on 3 separate occasions to accuse now a fellow medical professional of foul play, to then just be dismissed like completely by the board. Just must be heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, and the frustration he must have felt as well.
Absolutely. I can't imagine. And as I say, like he's given multiple interviews after, the court case. So definitely recommend if you want to know more about that to search for him on YouTube. Baby N, a baby boy, was born 6 weeks early at the beginning of June 2016, weighing 3 pounds 11 ounces. That's about 1.4 kilograms. Letby came on duty just 6 hours after baby N was born, and in the early hours of the 3rd of June, Letby tried to kill him. The newborn baby had haemophilia, a condition known to cause severe bleeding. However, baby N had shown promising signs throughout the evening in the run-up to his collapse. Initially, he was injected with air on the 3rd of June. However, after successful resuscitation, Letby went on to attack him 12 days later on the 15th of June by thrusting his nasogastric tube into his throat, causing severe trauma and bleeding. Letby was found guilty of attempted murder of baby N, first by air embolism and secondly by thrusting the nasogastric tube into the throat. Baby O, a baby boy, was born on the 21st of June, just over 6 weeks early, weighing 4 pounds and 7 ounces, 2.1 kilos, and was one of 3 identical triplets. He was conceived naturally, and I'm highlighting this specifically as it's extremely rare for triplets not only to share the same placenta, and that means therefore they are identical, but also to have been conceived naturally. Now, this occurs just 1 in 200 million births.
Wow.
Having just returned from a week's holiday in Ibiza on the 22nd of June 2016, Letby came on shift on the 23rd of June. Baby O had been a perfect and healthy baby boy, despite his early arrival, and was due to go home when he collapsed unexpectedly on the 23rd. Post-mortem x-rays showed a higher than normal amount of gas in his body. Letby was found guilty of murdering baby O by inserting air via his nasogastric tube and trauma. And baby P, a baby boy, weighing just 4 pounds and 9 ounces, died just 23 hours after his identical brother, baby O, was murdered. Letby pumped air into baby P's tiny stomach via his nasogastric tube while feeding him milk at 6 p.m. on the 23rd of June, just 13 minutes after his baby brother had died. Expert witness testimony stated that this excess air shattered the little boy's diaphragm and led to his death the following day on the 24th of June. However, in the hours leading up to this, doctors had believed he would make a full recovery. As they prepared him for his transfer to another hospital, Letby was heard saying to a fellow nurse, "He's not leaving here alive, is he?" Letby was found guilty of murdering baby P by air via nasogastric tube. And just wanted to point out that during the trial, the nurse that she was heard saying that to was a witness and had said how unusual it was for someone to come forward and be like saying something like that. Like, he's not leaving here alive, is he? Like, obviously nurses can see how grave situations are
Yeah.
in the medical setting, but they don't often make comments like that, especially when the doctors feel like he's making promising recovery.
It's almost like she's like setting the scene, preparing people. So if it does happen, they're like, yeah, okay, maybe that was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, when I heard that she'd said that, I kind of just thought, was she getting to that stage where it was more of a thrill for her to like
That makes sense. Like an escalation. Like, I've not been
mm,
caught so far. Let's push the boundaries.
yeah, just getting comfortable, right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Not long after the unexpected deaths of baby O and baby P, Dr. Stephen Brewery makes a call to the senior hospital manager requesting that Letby is removed from the unit. At this time, Dr. Brewery was assured that Letby was safe to work and would remain on the neonatal unit. However, the tipping point, as it is now known in this case, comes just days later when Letby was notified just before her night shift was due to start on the 27th of June that she should not come in that evening. At the time, this sent Letby spiraling, with jurors hearing transcripts and messages shared with multiple peers as she panicked about the decision that had been made not to bring her on to shift. Shortly after, she was assigned administrative duties within the patient experience team. By September 2016, Letby had submitted a formal grievance about her removal from the unit and was trying to get her position on the ward reinstated. The hospital's chief executive agreed in January 2017 that Letby should be allowed to return to the hospital. However, when 4 paediatric consultants complained about this decision, they were accused of being on a manhunt against Letby and were forced to write an apology letter to her ahead of her return to work. And 2 of those pediatric consultants were Dr. Breary and Dr. Ravi Jairam.
That's
So
crazy.
they had been like raising the flags and alarms over the last like 13 or 15 months by now. And still they're sat in a room being told you need to write a letter to her. You guys are on a manhunt. The Gang of Four, they were known as in trial, who had ganged up against Letby and were causing her all this grief and pain.
That's crazy. 4 medical experts, and what number would people go hang on? Like, and also, she's almost got caught. You think if she was of same mind, and obviously she isn't, if she's done all this, but if she was of same mind, you'd be like, okay, cut my losses here. I've almost been caught. Let's quietly resign and move somewhere else. Even if she can't
Yeah,
stop herself, move somewhere else
yeah.
and try again.
Again, it was something that's been like speculated on, like why didn't she move on? Because that's often how when you do hear of these rare cases of medical professionals like doing something sinister, you hear of them like moving between hospitals and almost like vanishing with it before anything comes up like formally and they're charged with anything and they just carry on behaving like they do. But I don't know. I think like my personal belief is that there was something in Letby that was like, I want to stay and see how much I can get away with. And I also think that she saw court as an opportunity to relive the crimes. And every time she got interviewed by police, she was so forthcoming with information. And I think she was curious as to see what they had on her.
Well, that's not unusual, is it? Criminals quite often get to a point where the court
Yeah.
case is a final, like, hurrah, it's final buzz and enjoyment. They get to relive the crimes.
Yeah. That's why I don't believe she wanted to leave. I think she wanted to stay and see, how much she could, how further she could take it. And there's probably an element of her in disbelief at this stage. There were multiple diary entries, and again, just wanted to keep it to the facts about the victims today. But as we're on the point, like, she wrote in her diary, like, and on post-it notes, I did this, I am evil, um, and the defense was suggesting that her mind had been poisoned by this gang of four who had told her, you're responsible for these deaths, whatever. But their confession notes there again, her moment of saying out loud, I'm responsible for this, and then she goes on and behaves like normal when she goes to work the next day, having that she's had that release at home, probably thinking no one will ever find this post-it note or this diary entry, and not thought any more of it.
That's crazy, isn't it, really?
So, following this incident in January 2017, when these four consultants were made to send apology letters to Letby, and the letters can be found online, they don't actually apologize to Letby for accusing her. They apologize for how they may have made her feel, and that their primary concern was about the unexpected crashes and deaths of the children, and that as a byproduct, they didn't intend for her to feel any harm or wrongdoing. So it obviously quite cleverly worded, but they still had to go through that process, which is just wholly unfair. But it took another few months for the police to become involved, and finally, 2 years after being removed from the neonatal unit, on the 3rd of July, as we said at the top of the episode, Lucy Letby was arrested for the first time.
Well, just a few things, Rachel, before you move on. It sounds like an apology you make when you don't have to, when you don't want to make one. I'm sorry you felt that way, rather than I'm
Yeah.
sorry for what I did. And so she was on administrative, like, not leave, but away from the ward for 2 years.
Mm,
For two
yeah.
years before the police got involved. Why did it take so long?
So obviously she was able to commit the crimes for the 13 months that we've recorded there. And then she was put on administrative duties while they brought in external doctors to the Countess to review the case notes and files. And nothing was done. And there were findings from those reviews of suspicion and unexplained deaths. But ultimately, the board wanted to reinstate Letby. So the consultants basically said, we need to contact the police. And there was a bit of back and forth between the board and the consultants. And eventually the police were contacted. So yeah, from June 2015 when it started to the police being contacted, that took 2 years. But Letby was only on administrative duties between that time for like 9 months or something. But the intention was to put her back on the neonatal ward to
Okay,
carry on.
that makes sense. I was just a bit confused, but that makes sense then.
So we've covered the 7 guilty verdicts for murder and the 6 guilty verdicts for attempted murder. But what about the other 4 babies featured in the court case? Baby H, Baby J, Baby K, and Baby Q. Verdicts could not be reached on these 4 cases, so I've summarised some information about the babies, but I just want to be clear that while she was charged with the attempted murder of these 4 babies, no formal verdicts were reached. And therefore, there is now a question as to whether there will be a retrial for these 4 babies. But so far, at the time of this recording, nothing has been confirmed. So I think after the verdicts, they're given a certain amount of time, aren't they, to decide whether they go for a retrial. So baby H was a baby girl born late September 2015, 6 weeks early, weighing 5 pounds and 2 ounces or 2.3 kilograms. Baby H appeared fine initially. However, 20 minutes after her birth, her breathing was laboured and she was placed on a ventilator immediately. She was monitored closely, and over the course of the next 40 hours, she suffered 2 collapses where the levels of oxygen in her blood dropped dramatically. She ended up having 3 drains placed into her chest to try and draw trapped air out. Baby H's second collapse resulted in her having no heartbeat for 22 minutes. Baby H, at the time of writing, is now 7 years old. No verdict was reached in the case of Baby H. Baby J, a baby girl born at the end of October 2015, was born 8 weeks early. Baby J had suffered complications with a perforated bowel the day after she was born and was transferred to Alder Hey Children's Hospital for emergency surgery shortly after the discovery. Baby J then returned to the Countess of Chester Hospital for aftercare 10 days later, and at 5 weeks old, her parents were preparing to bring her home on the 27th of November when she collapsed and suffered a seizure. Test results would later show her brain was starved of oxygen for a prolonged period of time, most likely have been due to smothering. But Baby J finally got to go home in January 2016 and is, at the time of this recording, age 7 and a very well little girl.
So that's good to hear, isn't it?
It is. And I think that, like, she had no heartbeat for 22 minutes.
Wow.
Oh, no, that was Baby H, sorry. No, it is. And I think that, like, she was starved of oxygen for a prolonged period of time. Like, how amazing is it that she has no, like, to date, any, like, implications because of that?
Yeah, that's a bit of good news at least.
Yeah. So no verdict was reached in the case of Baby J. Baby K, a baby girl, was born 15 weeks early and weighed just 1 pound and 8 ounces. That's 816 grams at birth. Just 2 hours after she was born, at around 4 a.m. in the morning, her oxygen levels fell dangerously low as her breathing tube had become dislodged. Strangely, though, the alarms were not sounding on the ward. After receiving an oxygen via a mask, she was stabilized, but then suffered further issues with the breathing apparatus, so the tube kept on becoming dislodged. Contact was made with Arrow Park Hospital, where she was then transferred for more specialist care. Baby K died at just 3 days old. It is recorded that she died of problems associated with her extreme prematurity, though, so it's important to note that Letby was never on trial charged with her murder. However, she was accused of the attempted murder, but no verdict was reached in the case of Baby K. And Baby Q, the 17th and final baby in this case, a baby boy, weighed just 4.5 pounds, just over 2 kilos, when he was born 9 weeks early in June 2016. Baby Q suffered a sudden collapse where he vomited, his heart rate fell, and his oxygen levels had dropped to life-threatening levels. The first nurse on scene had used suction to clear his airways, at which point completely clear fluid was being pumped out of his body. Later on, air was aspirated from Baby Q's tummy. He stabilized quickly and was placed on a ventilator, and antibiotics were prescribed. He was moved to Alder Hey, where he recovered quickly and was able to return home in full health. Baby Q, at the time of writing, is now 7 years old. It was suggested this clear fluid the nurse removed was water or saline, which had likely been forced down his nasogastric tube, with some air too. But no verdict was reached in the case of Baby Q. In the immediate aftermath, following Letby's removal from the ward in July 2016, there were no more sudden collapses or deaths of babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital. And in fact, since 2016, and at the time of writing this, there's only been one death recorded on the neonatal ward at the Countess. Now, I will caveat that this may be possibly attributed to the fact that, as well as having Letby removed from the ward, several safety measures were also introduced, and the ward also stopped taking very sick babies too, in an effort to prevent any further sudden collapses or deaths at the hospital. Because obviously they were under investigation by the police at that point.
There's a pattern. There's a pattern there, though, isn't there? Really.
Absolutely.
I mean, you hear about sometimes other cases where people may not actually be guilty, but this seems to be like quite clear cut because there's a clear pattern not only of what happens to the babies, who interacts with the babies, and then suddenly such a sudden drop off afterwards. That if it was down to just, now this is just my opinion here, people, by the way, but if it was down to just poor safety measures before the external doctors came in and investigated it, surely their findings would have been, it's down to these measures, A, B, C, and D, and if you change these, then it'd be fine. In which case, she would have never been charged with anything, would she? Because they'd be able to prove that it was down to those measures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think during the trial, this information about there being no further deaths on the ward, that was all kept away from the press. But after the trial, a lot of what came out around the behaviours on the ward post, her removal, it's quite astonishing. The facts and the figures, like obviously at that point she'd been found guilty, so people could start like knowing a little bit more and therefore not be biased one way or the other. But when you start looking at stuff like that, it really adds colour to the case, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So the case against Letby took 2 years to bring to court. And to give you an idea of what the investigation team had to go through in order to prep for court, there were 5,900 pages of statements, 34,177 pages of exhibits, 12,850 pages of audio transcript, and 246 witnesses either gave statements or attended court in Manchester during the trial.
Wow.
This is just the amount of evidence that made it to court, but the officers and detectives working the case would have had plenty more to work through over the 2-year period, which didn't make the cut. And that's pretty phenomenal, isn't it?
That is. Imagine A, being a juror on that case, on that trial, but B, imagine being one of the police officers, having to take that home with you every day for a few years. And I mean, some of the stuff, like in every trial, every one of our listeners knows that there's some stuff which they find out, which they like 99% is true, but they can't prove anything. So it never gets put into evidence or anything ever gets used. And they have to look at all this stuff. I don't envy these people at all.
There was no smoking gun in this case, but that is stacked up evidence, right? That is enough, like without the smoking gun, to bring it to trial.
Yeah, but what I mean is
there
may have been other babies where they're fairly certain she did it, but they just couldn't quite prove it. And it's
interesting, that point, and I will go on to discuss that in a moment. But just wanted to hit pause there. You said imagine being a police officer investigating. So over 60 detectives were involved in the case, and each kind of senior detective was given a baby to review, and that made sure that there was no cross-contamination between interviews with families and I guess the case that built up against each baby A to baby Q, with each detective being able to look at their corridor of evidence with their police investigation team. And then they all came back together in a room and went through one by one. And so detective looking at the case of baby A said, okay, so this is what happened. The baby was well. Letby came on shift, the baby crashed, and this then happened, and that kind of thing. And then somebody else would pipe up, oh, that's exactly what happened in my case. And they're, those detectives all coming together right at the end to share their findings was when that picture really started building. Because it wasn't just one detective that was like, oh, she clearly did it on that baby and that baby, so I'm just gonna, be of solid mind that she did it on the rest of them, if that makes sense.
It does. Imagine that then, Rachel, like 60 different babies. See, and now not every single one.
No, sorry, not 60 different babies, 60 different detectives that were working together on individual cases. So like there might have been cases where like 2 or 3 detectives were working on the one baby. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But even so, there would have been more than 17 if some of them. Yeah.
No, absolutely. During her trial, Letby spent a total of 14 days in the witness box, facing nearly 60 hours of questioning. But all along, she protested her innocence and tried to cast blame on other issues in the neonatal ward. However, the weakness in her defence was completely exposed when they failed to produce any medical expert or colleague or family member or friend who could testify on her behalf during this time. In fact, the only witness called by a legal team was a hospital plumber, Lorenzo Mansuti, who had worked at the Countess of Chester since before Letby was born. Lorenzo was only in the witness box for 25 minutes before Letby's barrister closed his case. It was actually Letby's defence that plumbing issues on the ward could have led to unhygienic conditions for the babies, resulting in the unexpected and/or unexplained deaths or collapses in some of the children. Obviously, with other issues being attributable to other deaths, like doctor-patient care, there not being enough nurses on the ward, and things like that.
Feels like a bit of a reach to me.
Yeah, and to be honest, the Countess was found to have not been sufficiently staffed at times for the amount of babies that were on the neonatal ward. So instead of having one to one care with very sick babies, a nurse might have had 2-to-1 care, like 2 babies to one nurse. Um, but that was obviously a finding and something that has since been addressed. But definitely not causing an unexpected crash or a death in the baby. After weeks and weeks of deliberation, on the morning of Friday, the 18th of August, 23, the jury of 11 returned their final verdicts. Letby was found guilty of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others between June 2015 and June 2016. She was found guilty of injecting infants with air, force feeding some, and poisoning others with insulin. And on Monday, the 21st of August, she was handed 14 whole life orders. Lucy Letby will die behind bars, along with 71 other people across England and Wales currently serving whole life sentences. And if that wasn't bad enough, Letby failed to attend court for both the final verdicts on the 18th of August and sentencing on the 21st, meaning that those family members impacted by her crimes had sat and listened to her lies over the 10-month court case, but were unable to share their emotional impact statements with the woman found guilty of killing or attempting to kill their children. As a side note, they will soon be bringing in new laws that see criminals having to attend their sentencing hearings across England and Wales. However, for this particular case, that just feels a little bit too little too late, as Letby's managed to escape listening to the horrific impact her actions had on those tiny, helpless victims and their families. Although the judge did rule that transcripts of the victim impact statements and his court summary will be shared with Letby in jail.
As for facing sentencing, I fully agree. I fully agree that someone should be in court to face their sentence, what they receive. The measures being put into place now, if they ever do become law, is another question, because a lot of times they say they do and they won't. It feels like a bit of a knee-jerk situation to me, because this is not a new thing, is it? Quite often this happened, and quite often the courts don't care. So I'm not sure how far that will actually get, especially with an election coming at the end of this year, or sorry, not at the towards the end of next year. If there's an election, all laws going through the system just get dropped, don't they? And they have to start again. So I'm not sure that would actually ever happen. But yeah, I agree that it should happen. Or even if I don't understand why they can't just, she's in prison. Like, if they want to move someone from one part of the prison to the other part of the prison and they refuse to move, they forcibly move them. Why couldn't they just do the same thing? Forcibly
She was
move
in
someone to
court.
them.
She was just under. Yeah, she
Even
was in court. She was just under, like, in the cells underneath the court. So you're
even
right.
so,
They
yeah.
don't forcibly remove, but this new law will see them use reasonable force to bring that person to court. And the concern in doing that is that it will become all about the fuss that the defendant makes in court on the day. They could be kicking and screaming or crying uncontrollably, or making it all about them, which is obviously a major red flag. So there needs to be a fine balance between, like, forcing them to court, but also making sure that they abide by the rules of court and um sent away to the cell because they are, what's the formal word for it, of baby brains attacking me, when you
Just
keep
when
on
you're,
interrupting the judge.
yeah, when you're disrupting the court, or I
Yeah, but
can't,
there's
there is, I can't
contempt
think.
of court.
Contempt of
Contempt of
court, yeah.
court. Yeah. So you don't want that to just be, the show, do you? At this point, Andrew, I'd usually read through the victim impact statements. However, given the amount of victims covered in this case, we will not be reading any victim impact statements today. Instead, we will read a statement from Janet Moore, Family Liaison Officer Coordinator at Cheshire Constabulary, who read the following out on the steps of Manchester Crown Court on the afternoon of Friday, the 18th of August. Words cannot effectively explain how we are feeling at this moment in time. We are quite simply stunned. To lose a baby is a heartbreaking experience that no parent should ever have to go through. But to lose a baby or to have a baby harmed in these particular circumstances is unimaginable. Over the past 7 to 8 years, we've gone through a long, torturous, and emotional journey. From losing our precious newborns and grieving their loss, seeing our children who survived, some of whom are still suffering today, to being told years later that their death or collapse might be suspicious, nothing can prepare you for that news. Today, justice has been served, and the nurse who should have been caring for our babies has been found guilty of harming them. But this justice will not take away from the extreme hurt, anger, and distress that we have all had to experience. Some families did not receive the verdict that they expected, and therefore it is a bittersweet result. We are heartbroken, devastated, angry, and feel numb. We may never truly know why this happened. So this has been season 3, episode 22. So Andrew, dare I ask, what did you think of the case today?
Yeah, exactly what I imagined it would be. Something I didn't enjoy. I didn't want to hear. Hopefully, my only hope is that good will come of this, that maybe it'll prevent and stop this happening again in the future. That's the only thing you can hope for this, because there is no good or good to come from this, is there?
Well, there is a public inquiry that will be taking place now. So, obviously looking into the NHS trust of the Lucy Letby case and how it was handled with those concerns. So you're absolutely right. Hopefully, a small silver lining in this case will be that good can come from it, and future medical professionals that aren't acting in the best interest of patients are caught and removed a lot earlier than was the case here. So today, given the nature of the crimes discussed, we've decided against wrapping up with our usual sit back, relax, and picture the scene. Instead, we will pause for 1 minute's silence out of respect for the little lives lost in the tragic case, the babies who will never be named. Please hug your loved ones a little tighter tonight. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.